I cannot anticipate what all readers want. I know what I want in a story, and that's what I try to convey in my books. I want something that feels authentic and yet also feels like, oh, what if this happened to me? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Like a little bit like aspiring, but still, like these last three books that I've written, the historical fiction, they've all featured real people, and the things that happened to them really happened. So that authenticity is extremely important to me. I want to faithfully convey these people and their surroundings as much as I possibly can, because otherwise it's not. Otherwise, I'm writing fantasy again, which I loved writing, but it's a different genre. I can make anything up in fantasy. I can tell you that my dragon looks like anything and does this, and nobody can say dragons don't do that. I'm like, in my world, they do. But in this world, in historical fiction, you really want it to be, I want to learn something as when I read, and I want it to be something that's not just fake. I want to learn a real thing. Like I learned a lot about the Titanic. I learned a lot about Collis Huntington, and I already knew something about Henry Huntington and Arabella, but I learned a lot about her and how clever and cunning and how she very smartly just continually lied to save her butt over and over again. She was willing to be blackmailed and paid off the blackmailer to keep her secrets. So I frankly admire that because she was trying to control her own narrative, and she succeeded until I came along. But no, I mean, it was kind of an open secret. But no, what I want is I want to be swept away with a story. I want it to be like, oh my gosh, did that really happen? Oh, wow. But it's got to be real as well. It's got to be grounded in fact. Otherwise, it's a different kind of story. Not a bad story, just a different thing. So for these, that's what I'm looking for. And when I read historical fiction, that's what I'm looking for. Am I a big outliner? No, no. I'm a fly by the seat of your pants kind of writer, and I enjoy that. I know it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. I mean, obviously, I have an idea. Arabella, for example, or and I know the broad outline of her life. I know the way she presented it. I know the way society perceived it. But then the more you dig up into her life, like I discovered that Arabella, for example, first went to New York as Arabella Worsham. Johnny Worsham was the owner of this gambling parlor that she worked at. So the speculation is, what, she really his wife? Because he frankly was already married to a different woman in Richmond. So he went to New York with her, and they set up this mansion that was very close to Collis's place. And then Johnny stayed around for a little bit, and then he took off, and she told everybody he died, but he hadn't died at all. He just went back. He just went back to Virginia to his actual wife. So that was part of her cover story, because I knew she ended up from poverty in Richmond to Gilded Age opulence in Manhattan, tracing her footprints about how she did that and how she maneuvered the facts. And then suddenly she was this genteel widow from the South of royal French descent and all this other stuff. None of it was true, but she maintained that. And I was like, that's one of the things that I learned when I was researching her life. And I was like, wow, good for her, man. She just took control of her life and won. So things like that. Lovely little filling in the blanks where like, she goes from A to B. How does she do it? And then discovering that's kind of a thrill, actually. And I hope I was able to successfully pass that on. My publisher would like me to write about real people in the Gilded Age. Da 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 da. This had something happen to them. This is a book of the Lusitania. I am surprised at how many people don't know what the Lusitania is now. But I grew up knowing what it was. You know what that is, right? You've heard of the Lusitania. Yeah. So the Lusitania was in 1915 the most luxurious and fastest passenger ship in the world. It was also the beginning of World War I, which is again a period that I've already written about and I covered. So I'm familiar with it and I enjoy it. This is the true story of a woman named Rita Jolivet, who was a screen actress, a silver screen actress and a stage actress on the West End in London and on Broadway. And she was this rising young star when she boarded the Lusitania from New York going to Liverpool. She wanted to say goodbye to her little brother who had just enlisted in the war and was about to be sent to the front. That's summarizing a great deal of it. The book, basically starts with her childhood and this kind of enchanted, beautiful childhood in England. And she's got this little sister who's a violin master, and her little brother who's this adventurous, goofy guy. And they're this tight-knit family. But Rita wants to be an actress. She breaks out of her society. Her family was very upper class. She breaks out of that cage, that gilded cage, so to speak, because she's dying to be a star, and she succeeds. She does it. She goes to Italy. She meets this handsome Italian count. She starts making movies in Naples. And then she gets discovered by Cecil B. DeMille in Hollywood, and she makes this movie called The Unafraid with him. And she goes to New York for the premiere, and it's this huge hit. And just not that long later, she gets a cable from her sister in England saying, "Hey, Alfred, our brother, just enlisted. Can you make it here in time to get to say goodbye to him?" And it was very important to him that she do that. So she booked the fastest ship she could, which was the Lusitania. But the Lusitania was a British flag ship. And on the morning of the Lusitania's departure, the Imperial German Embassy actually took out an ad in like half a dozen New York newspapers that basically said, "Notice, travelers are advised that there's a state of war between Great Britain and Germany. And if you're on a British flag ship or any of their allies, you are liable to destruction." I mean, it was very not subtle. And sometimes it was placed right next to Cunard's ad for the Lusitania. But she decided that, she wasn't really afraid of much. She decided that she was going to risk it because she wanted to see her brother very badly. So I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the Lusitania does get torpedoed. She survives. Several friends of her do not. And it's just the story of how she did that. And I was lucky in that she was someone who was summoned to the limited, what is it? The hearing, basically discovering the hearing to determine who was liable for the destruction, the limited liability insurance hearing or something like that. And she was a witness. So she gave her account very calmly, very dispassionately, um, very interestingly. So I was able to use her words and follow exactly what happened with her. And she was a vivacious person. I was also luckily able to see a copy of a letter that she wrote to a theater critic in the 60s describing her final moments aboard the Lusitania. And so it was all very moving and factual. And people are like, I was like, "Oh, Lusitania." My publisher was pushing that again. I'm like, I don't want to be the shipwreck author, you know, but it turned out to be an extremely exciting, moving story in a different way from Titanic. She didn't have a husband then. She ended up marrying the Count, but she didn't have a husband then, so she didn't lose her husband. But like I said, she lost people close to her heart on that ship. And then later on, those repercussions echoed through her family in an even more dire way that I won't reveal. But um, she survived it, and so she was tough. She clung to this upside down lifeboat for hours and hours, waiting to be rescued. And then once they were rescued, she started taking care of other people who were physically more injured and less mentally capable than she was, I would say. So it was a very interesting story to research. And once again, there are lots of people out there who are super duper interested in Lusitania. So you have to get all those facts right again. You have to make sure it's factually accurate, everything you described. Like the Lucy was not, even though it was the most luxurious passenger ship of its time because Titanic had sunk 3 years earlier, it didn't have a lot of the amenities that Titanic had. Like Titanic had like a Turkish spa, and it had a indoor swimming pool, and it had a racquetball court and all this stuff, but Lusitania didn't have any of that. So I think that people who are expecting the same kind of Titanic opulence should know that no, it's a whole different ship from a whole different line and a little bit older, but still extremely luxurious. And you can easily recount the mistakes that happened that led up to the moment it got torpedoed, or she got torpedoed, sorry. And I try to include some of that in the story because it was important. Like the morning or the afternoon of the sinking, all the portholes in the dining saloon, the first class dining saloon, were open, which was crazy because they knew that there was a risk that they could be torpedoed. And, a porthole is just a hole in the side of a ship. So if you leave that open and the ship gets hit, it's going to go down a lot more quickly with all these holes letting in the water. So for some reason, they decided that was fine to do. And just little facts like that lead up to this incredible tragedy. I try to get those in there too. And little factoids, like there were three German stowaways on the ship that the passengers did not know about at the time, but it finally came out at the end. Three German stowaways found hiding on the very first day in a closet of a steward of an Englishman who also happened to turn out to be a German spy. So lots of intrigue because it was a war and there were spies and there was a lot of dire happenings, even aboard the ship that was supposed to be this luxurious, peaceful crossing. I was lucky again that the Lusitania is famous. There are several meticulously researched books out there that mention different passengers and crews' experiences aboard the ship as it happened. And like I said, I was lucky because Rita herself testified as to where she was and what she was doing when the torpedo hit, and then what she did afterwards, how she got up from D deck where her cabin was to A deck where the boats were, and then how she survived that. So all of that is extremely real, extremely factual. Yeah, I was lucky. Again, it's famous. It's a famous shipwreck. Maybe not Titanic famous, but still quite famous.
Any favorite characters you invented to bring in here along with the ones that were
Nobody's invented.
it's all real. What about
Everybody's
real
real.
people that you inhabited on the page? Any real
No,
characters?
no. In fact, it got to the point where I was like, why does everybody have the same name? Like, so Rita's father's name was Charles, her brother's name was Alfred, her first husband's name was Alfred Charles, her mentor's name was Charles. And I'm like, the one thing I did do is I didn't change her husband's name, but I'm like, I can't have another Alfred or another Charles. I'm going to call him Freddie. I don't know if he actually went by Freddie in real life, but I'm like, I have to distinguish this guy from her brother, her father, and her mentor, all these men with the same name. So that was basically the one thing I made up was just the nickname for this, her first husband. So otherwise, no, everybody's real. It all happened. I was very fond of her sister Inez. She was the violinist. She was massively talented. She fell in love at a young age with this older man who was likely a spy for the British government and the Russian government. But he was an import-export agent, but he had crazy social connections for an import-export agent from America, from this middle-class America man. And he was deeply in love with Inez. She was deeply in love with him. She had this tender heart and this beautiful talent. She ended up playing at the Met several times. Um, she was a favorite of the Tsar and Tsarina of Russia. She gave private performances to royalty basically all across Europe. So she was this girl who was Rita's younger sister, very shy, very pretty, just did not want to leave her childhood home. But Rita sort of forced her into that. And after that, she blossomed. So I loved that about her. Her arc is very beautiful and I'm going to say tragic in the end, but lovely. And I felt for her. But I loved Rita too, but she was a totally different sister. She was the vivacious, outgoing, go get 'em kind of gorgeous young woman who sees the reins of her destiny. Ugh, that sounded so cliche, but you know what I mean. She basically knew what she wanted and she was going to get it and nothing was going to stand in her way. And that's what happened.